Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the IEA's press conference today from Paris. We are joined today by our Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, and a number of our senior executives to talk about the IEA's views on a number of topics, including next year's projects. We will hear from Dr. Birol, and we will have some time for some questions. And with that, I would like to please turn it over to our Executive Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jet. Greetings to all of you, dear colleagues, dear friends from International Energy Headquarters in Paris. We thought we hold this press conference to share our views on the situation of the global energy markets, as well as our impressions about the COP26 outcomes, and following some special projects we would like to announce today. Let me start with the energy markets. You, I guess, all heard about the oil stock release yesterday. We will come to that in a moment. But at the IEA, dear colleagues, as many of you know, we follow the trends and developments very closely. In fact, the secure and affordable energy supplies are at the core of our mission. And we believe they need to be a core part of policymakers' thinking as we seek to accelerate clean energy transitions. But I want to make a point at the outset, very clear. We believe today's prices for key fuels are well in the danger zone for most of the developing economies in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, and they are causing real hardships for many households and businesses. We think it is very important to understand what are the drivers of these developments, today's market situation, is we believe there are a number of factors, not one single factor, causing this price volatility. But one thing again I want to make clear before going to the factors that we believe cause this market volatility, it is not accurate to lay the responsibility of the high energy prices at the door of clean energy policies. Because we often see that there are attempts to portray that these high prices are a result of the pushing clean energy policies. We think it is not accurate and it is not fair. If there is something related to clean energy policies, not because we had a lot of clean energy policies in place leading these high prices, maybe we have too few clean energy policies that cause this challenge. Now, what are the main factors? At the IEA, we are a evidence-driven organization. We look at the facts, and we see 5 major factors. First of all, the global economy this year is rebounding very strongly, about 6% growth. And it is the highest growth of global economy we have seen in the 50 years we had behind us. Largest growth. And this is fueled by fossil fuels. When we look at the numbers, natural gas, for example, we expect this year to grow about 5%, a very strong growth. Oil, 7% growth, which is about close to 6 million barrels per day, which is the highest growth that the oil industry registered in the last 50 years. And similarly, coal, a major growth, more than 10%, which is about 475 million tons of coal, which is the highest growth in the history that the coal industry registered. And this rapid growth put a lot of pressure on energy sector supply chains. So this is the first factor we think behind the high energy prices we are seeing today. The second one is weather. There are many weather-related factors, but if I have to pick up one of them, which is drought. Significant drought in Brazil, China, India, US, and elsewhere put the electricity generation from hydropower at very low levels, which in turn meant this has been compensated by additional growth coming from gas and coal. Third factor, there were record number of planned and unplanned supply outages and supply facilities around the world. For example, I asked my colleagues about LNG that we talk a lot nowadays. The LNG outages this year were about 30% higher than historical averages. And this is, of course, another major issue as far as the supply chains are concerned. But in addition to droughts, we have seen a lot of floods and fires in the supply facilities. The fourth one is about much discussed investments. When we look at the annual investments for oil and gas, we see a decline. But this is mainly, if not exclusively, driven by the commodity price collapses in 2014, 2015, as well as 2020. It will be again inaccurate to say that this is as a result of clean energy policies that we think. And again, if there is something, we were critical to many governments around the world that they don't put enough emphasis or provide the incentives for clean energy policies, including demand-side policies to bring the demand down. The fifth and the last factor I would like to underline is that caused this high prices is that the position of some of the major oil and gas suppliers. And some of the countries did not take, in our view, a helpful position in this context. In fact, some of the key strengths in today's markets may well be considered as artificial tightness. Why I say artificial? Because when we look at the oil markets today, we see that close to 6 million barrels per day of spare production capacity lies with the key producers, OPEC plus countries. And when we look at the natural gas, Europe, where we see high gas prices, the Gazprom storage sites in Europe are experiencing very unusual low levels. So therefore, in our view, there is enough oil, enough gas, but they do not meet the consumers. So these are some of the thoughts we have as far as the energy markets are concerned. Let me move to the other topic, which is another critical topic, and which is also at the heart of the IEA's interests and daily work, which is the climate change. Now, COP26 in Glasgow finished 10 days ago. We received a lot of requests about our assessment. How do we see COP? Is it a failure? It's a success? We wanted to wait and see a bit, and we avoid to make some snap judgments. But unfortunately, some of those judgments, we believe, were a bit on the pessimistic side. We do not consider Glasgow as a failure. We believe that the COP26 achieved a lot. Did it achieve everything? Not at all. But to portray this as a failure is, we believe, is not helpful and not accurate. We think COP26 has provided a significant momentum for the necessary transformation of the global energy sector. Now, I mentioned the achievements, I mentioned the success stories. There are many of them, but I would like to highlight some of the key achievements that we think are important. First and foremost, commitments. Now, today, the countries that account over 90% of global economy made commitments to reduce their emissions to net zero, 2050 or thereafter. We are, of course, well aware that the commitments and pledges are not enough on their own. Implementation is key, but commitments are central to the architecture of the Paris Agreement, so I think we should not downplay their significance. There are many announcements, and I would like to highlight two of them, I believe, of noteworthy. One of them is coming from India, a major developing country with 1.4 billion population, and the impressive targets India put on the table were of critical importance in my view. On a multilateral basis, the global methane pledge was a major achievement that can make a vital difference in the short term. More than 100 countries signed the global methane pledge. At the IEA, we look at those pledges. We said, if those pledges were fully and in a timely manner, if they were to be implemented, there is an if and a big if, what would it mean? It would mean that the global temperature rise can be below 2 degrees, more precisely, according to our analysis, 1.8 degrees Celsius. We are well aware, once again, I am saying it for the third time, that putting the pledges and commitments are not enough. Implementation is critical, but we think so many countries making pledges and commitments are an important step in the right direction. The second area after the commitments we think is an important achievement is the collaboration. We have consistently, stubbornly, maybe sometimes at the cost of being boring, highlighted the critical importance of international collaboration to reach our international climate goals. With international collaboration, we can reach our goals in a timely manner and much less expensive than we do otherwise. And in that respect, we were very happy to see the collaborative environment atmosphere in many cases in Glasgow, and I would like to bring to your attention two examples. The first one is US-China joint declaration. We think this was a major statement about the intention of the two largest emitters of the world to work together and accelerate their actions over the next few years. We think cooperation between the world's two biggest economies can provide vital leadership for the world. The second one, which didn't make enough headlines in my view, is the Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa. In this case, we have seen a number of major countries and institutions have committed to support South Africa's move away from coal, a major coal country. And this is in a way that not only focuses on emissions, but also social aspects of the energy transition, so-called just transition, a crucial topic for the IEA work. We think it's a very important example, the South Africa example, of pursuing an orderly transition and with a financing element to back it up. In the collaboration context, there are, of course, areas that fell short. This includes support for adaptation efforts and addressing the key issue of loss and damage. And we think there is a lot of work to be done to resolve these issues in a fair and just manner. A third area where I would like to note progress is on the rules. A major task at COP26 was to agree elements of the Paris rulebook, how to implement different aspects of the Paris Agreement. This issue didn't grab the headlines as well, but we have to recognize that COP26 undoubtedly moved things forward on Article 6 and other key elements. From our point of view, another important outcome was the very fact that we have now new mechanisms put in place to encourage countries to keep ratcheting up their commitments year after year at each successive COP meetings. And this should help us to close the ambition gap I mentioned a few minutes ago. So, dear colleagues, aside from these three important areas, the commitments, collaboration, and the rules coming from COP26, another area I want to mention today is the issue of finance. We have seen some clear efforts at COP26 to improve the situation, but we believe it is far from being satisfactory. As International Energy Agency, we have again and again highlighted the very fact that we believe the fault line of reaching our global climate goals is to finance clean energy transitions in emerging world. And I think the outcomes of Glasgow fell short in this area. So, where do we go from here? What will the IEA do? We will put our emphasis mainly how we can, as the global energy authority, leading the global climate change in the energy sector, to fight the climate change in the energy sector, we wanted to facilitate the implementation part, especially in some of the nerve centers of the issue. As such, we believe that our planet's climate does not respond to what people say or what people pledge, but it responds to what people do in the real life. So therefore, we have decided to come up with some special projects to facilitate the implementation. These 4 special projects I will outline to you will be on top of our regular work we have been doing in the IEA, and we will be doing our reports on oil, gas, coal, electricity, investment, different clean energy technologies. We have now 4 new initiatives that I would like to announce today. Number 1, in June 2022, next year, we are going to come up with a net zero coal report. As we all know, unabated coal was one of the major discussion topics in Glasgow. But I think we need to be very clear-headed about what comes next. Coal is the single most important fuel when it comes to CO2 emissions. And here, to have some clear strategies, strong policies, and international support, especially in order to phase out coal in the emerging countries, is critical. So therefore, we are going to make a report with the help of several institutions working with the emerging countries, how we can bring the coal use, unabated coal use down, especially in the next 10 years, as it is a major problem for our climate change as well as air pollution in many emerging countries. But once again, I want to underline, we want to make this report from the point of view of the emerging countries' just transition and the international support, how to mobilize, how to come up with some practical steps for the international financial support will be critical in our report, which we are going to come up in June 2022. Second, again next year, May 2022, we are coming with a nuclear for net zero report. As our roadmap we published last May shows, we need to generate a lot of more electricity in the future if we were to reach our net zero targets. While the renewables will provide the bulk of this electricity, renewable generation, solar and wind, we think we need other low carbon sources such as nuclear power. Witnessing the interest in nuclear power in many countries, both in developed and developing world, we are going to come up with a nuclear report where we are going to look at the different pathways to see how nuclear generation can increase in a safe way, providing electricity security, providing support for electricity security, but also help to bring the emissions down. And here, there will be a special emphasis on the small modular reactors that many countries around the world are interested in. And this report to come again May 22 next year. The third special project is on methane. International Energy Agency has been a long-standing champion of addressing the methane emissions. Some of you may know, since almost 10 years we are working on this subject. One of the important areas when we look at the methane emissions is data. So we have decided February 2022, only a few months of time, we are going to make available for everybody a database. We call it IEA Methane Tracker, which will have the entire methane emissions coming from oil, natural gas, and coal, with adding the available estimates for emissions from agricultural waste. We are going to make a publicly available methane tracker for everybody. And of course, this will be coming on top of our usual policy support for many countries in terms of what kind of regulations, so-called tried and tested policy and regulations, to be put in place. Our methane tracker will have all the countries, country by country, and source by source available for everybody. Fourth and the last initiative or project, if you wish, is on tracking. As I mentioned, government's ambitions for cutting emissions rose to a huge, unprecedented level at COP26. But we are looking for action and reverse implementation. We have been tracking different aspects of energy since years, making it publicly available. And we are now tasked or asked by the COP26 presidency in Glasgow in order to track the developments in 4 major areas, namely global power generation, road transport, iron steel sector, and hydrogen. We will look year by year to determine whether the developments in these 4 major critical areas are in line with the international climate goals, and highlight the gaps and provide policy advice to governments how they can narrow that gap. All these 4 projects, dear colleagues, they are work on coal, nuclear power, methane tracker, and they are tracking these 4 critical areas will be freely downloadable in our website for anybody who is interested. So, dear colleagues, our views on energy security, energy markets, our observations and impressions from COP26 are as such. And as you see, in addition to our work and regular work on all the fuels, all technologies, we are proposing 4 new projects in order to help the world to reach its energy and climate goals. I would like to thank here to all IEA family member governments. We have 38 of them, as well as my colleagues. Some of my colleagues are with me here today for their support and for their hard work. So with this, I would like to turn back to my colleague, Mr. Jet Mawat. Jet, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. With this, we're going to take a 3-minute break so that we can collect questions from reporters who are following this press conference on Zoom, and we will be right back with you from Paris. Thank you. Great. Welcome back for our Q&A portion. We're getting a lot of questions, many questions on a variety of topics. I'm going to start by just putting together a number of questions we've received about the announcement yesterday. Question from Shadia Nasrallah from Reuters, and similar question from Shinichi Ikeda from Yomiuri newspaper. Essentially, has the IEA played any role in the stockpile release? And a similar question from Mr. Ikeda saying the quantity of release will be relatively small. What is your view on the impact on the market? Perhaps that's the first set of questions. And the second question from Grant Smith from Bloomberg, if OPEC Plus is taking an unhelpful position, how much do you think they should increase production at the next meeting? Perhaps this could be a first round on this topic. And Dr. Birol, second question about, sorry, I'm losing track, about Russia. Does the IEA think that Russia is holding back gas exports to Europe?
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps I'll start with the US government announcement yesterday. And I may even ask the support of my colleague, Mr. Keske Sadomeri, who is the Director of Energy Markets and Security at the IEA. I would perhaps start to say that we noted, of course, the announcement of the US government in parallel with other countries such as China, India, Japan, Korea, and United Kingdom. We recognize, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the rise in oil prices placing a burden on consumers in these countries and also in several emerging countries. And it also puts additional pressure on inflation in a period where economic recovery remains uneven and still faces a number of risks. In that respect, we see where they come from, and the decisions are made by the governments who are all members of 38 IEA family here. US, China, India, Japan, Korea, and United Kingdom. Having said that, dear colleagues, this is not an IEA collective response. I wanted to make it clear. IEA collective response system is in place in case of a major oil supply disruption. We had such collective actions 3 times in the past, 1991, 2005, and 2011, for different reasons, supply disruptions. Perhaps I can turn here to Mr. Sadomori to a bit elaborate on that.
Thank you, Executive Director. So there were 3 cases. The first one was in the build-up to the first Gulf War in 1991. Second one was after Hurricane Katrina and Rita damaged the offshore oil production facilities and the refineries in the Gulf of Mexico region. That was in 2005. The third one was as a response to the major supply disruptions as a result of Libya's civil war in 2011. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadomori. As you see, they were all as a response to a major supply disruption. And having said that, once again, I want to underline, we very much recognize where the collective action idea initiative comes from. We are, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are worried about the prices, oil and natural gas prices, and for the emerging countries, for their economies, we can say that it is in a danger zone. And here perhaps I can come to the second question about how much OPEC Plus countries should bring oil to the markets to comfort the markets. So it is, of course, completely up to the OPEC Plus countries, but those countries are part of the global economy. I believe all of us, all the nations and all the governments of the world would like to see an even and balanced economic recovery around the world. And I know that all these producing countries care about the emerging countries, developing countries, and their economic development processes. So as such, I very much hope to see that in their next meeting or meetings, they take this situation into account and make the necessary steps in order to comfort the global oil markets and help to bring the prices down at reasonable levels. The third question was, if I'm not, it was about Russia. Okay, Russia. So Russia is, of course, a major exporter to Europe. When we look at the next few months, we European consumers, they have to pay attention to many things in terms of gas, but two things, basically, what Russia will decide and how the temperature will be, how harsh the winter will be. In terms of Russia, our analysis show that Russia can easily can increase its exports to Europe about 15% and bring the storage levels up, and as such can significantly comfort the European gas markets. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. We have a second round of questions. Some of those questions are more related to the announcements that you've made. The first question from Jeff Brady from NPR. For the Net Zero Coal Report, which you mentioned, which countries have agreed to work with the IEA, and which countries do you hope will join you for this work? Second question, also linked to the question to the project you mentioned on methane. The methane pledge from the COP is just for 30% reduction in 2030. What could be achieved with more reductions? This one is from Terry Erikstad from Norway. And then if I can throw in a third question about, you've talked about governments raising ambitions. What could this mean for global warming? How will the IEA work with governments to deliver on these promises?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the first question on coal. Dear colleagues, after we made our net zero roadmap for the world, we have been asked by many countries to help them to bring their emissions down by providing their domestic national roadmap. We are working, some of them we have started, some of them we finished, some of them we'll be starting soon. I can tell you that the three largest coal using countries, China, India, Indonesia, who have a coal share more than 60%, we have been working with them. And this coal work will be also in cooperation with those countries, not only with the governments, but the utilities. We are going to work with them how we can find a fair solution in order to retire some of their plants early, the others maybe a few years later. But once again, in the absence of international support, this will not be easy, if at all possible. Maybe I can here turn to my colleague, Mrs. Laura Cosi, who is our Chief Energy Modeler. Would you like to, Laura, tell us a bit more about our call report?
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Yes, with pleasure. So, as Dr. Birol mentioned, the idea is really a continuation, a follow-on, a deep dive based on the net zero by 2050 analysis we released just 6 months ago. Now, coming out of Glasgow, we realized that big steps have been made, but when we look at 2030 in particular, we still see a significant gap to reach a trajectory that is fully compatible with net zero by 2050. And a large chunk of this gap is with coal, for good reasons. Dr. Birol mentioned that in many emerging economies, there are real significant reasons on the ground why we have having difficulties in phasing out coal. So we will work with those economies, especially with the view to 2030, and looking at 3 key topics. For example, just transition. What can happen to jobs there, and what can we do to help those communities? Second, affordability of electricity and maintaining security. Third, financing not only the coal phase out, but also the increase of the new technology. So this is certainly the key topics we will address, not forgetting that coal is not only used in the power sector, but also outside, notably in industries, and their innovation will also play a big role, such as in steel and other sectors. So these will be the key areas of focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kozi. Again, this report is geared to implementation, how we can facilitate the implementation in a fair and pragmatic way. The second question was on methane. So what does this 30% reduction mean, and how the IEA work can help here? So 30% reduction in the methane pledges globally means the following, dear colleagues. If I can just translate it into the daily language, if the countries, if the 30% global methane goal is achieved, it will have the same impact on the temperature rise as if all the cars of the world, all the trucks of the world, all the planes of the world, and all the ships of the world turn to net zero technologies. So it is such an important issue, and it is the reason we wanted to make 2 things here. One, accurate, always up-to-date, a global IEA methane tracker, country by country, source by source, highlighting the methane emissions, and provide some advice, policy and regulatory advice, how we can bring it to down. So perhaps I can turn here my colleague, Mr. Tim Gould, who is our Chief Energy Economist, to elaborate a bit more on our methane work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. I think the key thing to understand with the global methane pledge is that this is for a 30% reduction to 2030 in all the methane emissions that are attributable to human activity. And the main source of those emissions is in agriculture, followed by energy, and followed by waste. So there's a number of additional sources of methane emissions beyond the energy sector. But in our view, it's the energy sector that really needs to take the lead. Because we believe that many of the most cost-effective opportunities for reduction are precisely in fossil fuel operations, notably from oil and gas, but also from coal. So we need to reduce methane emissions everywhere. But if we're going to hit that 30% target, the energy sector will need to be front and center in those efforts. And that's why we've looked at what the energy sector could deliver over the next 10 years. And in our view, we could be achieving a much larger reduction in those energy sector related methane emissions already by 2030. So in the net zero roadmap that's been mentioned, there is a 75% reduction in emissions of methane from fossil fuel operations by 2030. And that's what we're working on. That's the efforts that the executive director mentioned are very much focused on delivering that kind of target. Now, you may ask, so if the energy sector achieves a 75% reduction, then how far would that get us towards the global goal, the 30% goal that's in the global methane pledge? And we looked at this in some detail. And if the energy sector does what it can, that would get the world most of the way towards that global goal. So if the energy sector delivers, you deliver a 25% reduction in emissions, methane emissions from all sources of human activity. So I think that illustrates that the energy sector is really central to some of these near-term efforts. And we're going to be working with partners country partners, institutional partners, non-governmental organizations to support those efforts.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm just going to repeat the question we got about raising ambitions at COP26 and what this means for global warming, and maybe tack on a final question that we've been getting on nuclear power in the current context, since you mentioned that we're also working on a nuclear report that's going to be published in May. What would be the consequence of that? So perhaps Dr. Birol.
So I can perhaps start with the raising ambitions and how do we know whether governments are doing what they say they have been committing. Now, what does it mean if those all these countries around the world fulfill their commitments in a timely manner and fully, I should say? This means global temperature rise will be limited to 1.8 degrees. Of course, here the most critical period is the next 10 years. We have to concentrate on that, as we will do at the IEA. And our job here is twofold. One, to provide a roadmap for the countries how they can the best cost-effective way, in an energy-secure way, to reach their climate goals. And the second, provide advice to them throughout the process and track those developments. Maybe I can turn here my colleague, Dr. Timur Gül, who is overseeing the entire technology work at the IEA. Timur?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Birol. And I think key point is here really to say that the energy transformation of, or the transformation of the energy sector is a long-term challenge to 2040, to 2050, 60, 70, depending on the net zero target that governments have set themselves. But it's not a transformation that can wait to start in 10 years, 20, 30 years of time. It's an effort that needs to start today. Think of a marathon. You don't start a marathon at kilometer 10 and think you're going to make it on the podium in the end. It's an effort that has to start from day one. We at the IEA, we've been tracking progress in various different ways in the energy sector at the highest level through our data, CO2 emissions, energy data. We've been tracking clean energy technology progress across 46 different technologies and sectors. We are tracking progress on innovation, on investment, on sustainable recoveries, and we are very happy now, of course, and very pleased to track progress towards the 4 critical energy areas of the Glasgow breakthroughs, much like a gendarmerie, if you want, to make sure that we are measuring progress not only at the highest level, at the CO2 level, not only at the level of energy, but where it really matters in the details of the energy sector, helping hopefully governments to fine-tune their strategies and feeding into the various different other work areas, such as our road mapping efforts that Dr. Birol mentioned.
Thank you very much. Now, the last question about nuclear power. Do we think that the nuclear discussion is getting a new momentum in the markets? Yes, I would say so. I believe it is driven by 3 factors. One of them is the very high energy prices around the world provide momentum for looking for alternatives in addition to renewable energy, clean alternatives, because we all know that the solar, wind, their costs are coming down and providing a very good option for the clean electricity generation. But in addition to that, several countries around the world, in Europe, France, for example, UK, and several Eastern European countries, United States, Canada, Brazil, China, India, Japan, many countries around the world are much more closely looking at this option, nuclear option, compared to a year or 2 years ago. The second is that we are understanding, learning by doing, that we need to use all clean energy technologies in hand to reach our climate goals. It requires Herculean efforts, and we cannot sacrifice this or that technology, putting it out of the menu. Of course, there are countries who would opt to use nuclear. We respect that. And there are countries who opt not to use nuclear. We respect them equally. So we are going to, again, work with all the countries and institutions to come up with a report. And the third reason is there are some technological advances in the nuclear technology, including the recent momentum in the small modular reactors. We would like to look at the cost and the technological feasibility of SMR, small modular reactors, in the next years to come, and we'll come up with this report next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director, and that will be all the time we have for today. I would like to conclude this. I will perhaps turn it maybe for a final word to you, Dr. Birol, to conclude this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, very many thanks for so many of you following this event, our briefing here. I see that there are many other questions. Please, let's share it with our responsible colleagues to reply to those questions one by one. And finally, I would like to say at the International Energy Agency, dear colleagues, we are going to keep a close eye on continue to close on energy markets, energy security, affordability of energy, but also we will continue to lead the fight against climate change. I am very fortunate as head of the IEA having such wonderful colleagues. Some of them are here, and the other 300 of them are following, I hope, this event, as well as all IEA 38 family member governments for their support, as well as several colleagues, institutions, governments, organizations with whom we are looking forward to work together to bring the world to a more sustainable future. We thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.